Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. This time we'll be talking about the Weapon Refine tier list update. And well, gonna be completely honest, this video is a bit late. And there's really no reason behind it, I was just feeling very lazy. Last Wednesday was my retake for the machining exam finally, since March break is finally over. And I passed it, so that's not a stress anymore, and now that I have no stress on me, it's such a struggle to just want to work on anything. In fact, I had the video all done, all ready to just be recorded for like 2 to 3 days at this point. I just did not have the drive to record, which is weird to say, because typically when I have everything ready, I'm like, yeah, I can finally get this done, and I just record it. But not this time for some reason. I don't know how to. I don't know what to say about this. It's just I was lazy, really. Still, with the coronavirus basically giving me an extra 2 weeks of free time, I guess I'll be trying to work more on this. Probably will be actually streaming more, because might as well stream what I'm working on at this point, because that gives me a bit more of an incentive to work on the content in question, and at the same time it gets me to talk to people. But other than this, there's really not much else to say. Let's talk about the Refine tier list itself. Alright, so this batch has been weird. I don't understand why we got a Refine for World of Thracia Owen, which is, if you're considering all the units of this banner pre-Refine, before the Refine sets in, is probably the strongest unit of the bunch, because she's on a horse on top of having a stat line equivalent to something like Nino or Tharja, and had already a Blade Tome to begin with no cooldown and no nothing, whereas Tharja and Nino did not have a weapon beforehand. So I don't understand why that thing got a Refine, but it did. And the Refine is actually quite good. So, Then the other two units, Gray and Tobin, that's kind of weird, honestly. Their weapon refines were not that great, but it's workable. And Jagen is just Jagen. They just did not do anything interesting. I have, like, made, in theory crafting, a weapon refine for Jagen and Gunther. And it's so much more interesting than the garbage they've got. I have no idea why they decided to go with the way they've done it, but oh well. So, speaking of refine, this is Jenkins Refine, and you know what? I'm going to go and grab the Jenkins Refine I've made. Oh. Just so you can see like the kind of thing I came up with, and then what IS did come up with. I know it's already on the channel, and if you're curious about Refine Theory Crafting, I have a whole playlist of those. I don't do them anymore because I just don't have the time for it. I'll just say it's a bit more creative than what we've got. Oh, no, that's just Jacob and Garneth. Hold up. There it is. So this is basically what I came up with, which is very simple. It's just basically dual range, and you get 6 res during combat. And then the weapon itself is simply if unit stats total are less than the foe. Essentially, if you have less BST than the enemy, okay, something as simple as this, less BST than the enemy, and if you're talking about, of course, you know, if you're talking about a range unit, they would basically count as 10 more BST than what they are, just to make up for the fact that he's a melee unit. Essentially, this would just give you extra stats and every stats to make up for the fact that you have less stats. The idea was just that you're a veteran, right? A veteran, you know, has less knowledge than, say, oh, I don't know, or rather, a veteran has more knowledge than a trainee unit, but a trainee unit has more potential. But the fact is, they have not reached their potential because they're still kids, right? Whereas a veteran would be the opposite, whereas they have reached their max potential. In other words, they know how to fight and they know how to turn the table on people that are still too young and inexperienced. That's kind of the idea of the weapon. And guess what? It fits Jagen and Gunther to a T. They are literally war veteran. So it would have fitted both of them perfectly, and ironically enough, we had the same weapon name. Wow. I came up with this weapon like 6 months ago, if not more at this point. It's honestly a really old theory craft, but honestly, it was actually pretty fun to make. Honestly, I feel like this effect would have fit any character that are veterans, but I don't know. I don't know. It feels like it's very unlikely that we're going to get a weapon like these. Anyway, for the weapon itself, it's not that great. The main problem with sabotage skills, and the reason why it's below character like Seth and Titania, is that Seth and Titania, you know what you're getting. You're always going to be getting those stats, no matter what. You just have to be within 2 range. This is all in your... how can I put this? This is all in your control. You cannot actually control sabotage as much, because what ends up happening is that the unit moves, they have to be stuck together. And if they are not stuck together, then you just don't get any debuff off. And that's kind of the weakness of sabotage skills. That doesn't mean they're garbage. No, they're balanced. They're fine. No. That's not the problem. The problem is more so the fact that if you're taking a character like this that's already weak as all hell and you're making him a support unit, if the support effect that he has is inconsistent because it all comes down to the AI, then it's less consistent than what Seth has to offer, what Titania has to offer, and so on and so forth. Especially Seth. Speed Tactic is still to this day very hard to get, and so having a Seth, which is a 3 to 4 star unit, is very easy to pull off and actually allows you to open up a few team comp that you would not be able to do otherwise. Very good for late tomes in AR, for example. It gives you a lot of room to work with, essentially, is what I'm trying to get at. So yeah, it's overall very good. Now, while I do say this, the other effect that he has is basically if he's attack, he gets 5 attack and res, and if he's the one initiating, as long as he has 70% HP or more, he gets 5 attack and res. That's not bad, but the thing is, let me just compare this to, say, Loot, and this is why Loot is so much higher despite the fact that she has sabotage. Right, so first off, it's 2 sabotage, not 1. It's speed and res. And speed can be a lot more deciding than attack, but attack is still very good. But also, Loot gets 4 attack, speed, def, and res if the enemy has a debuff of any kind on them. On top of having a stat line that is overall superior to Jagen. On top of being ranged. Do you see where I'm going with this? Honestly, they could have just given him 5 across the entire board as the base effect, if he's attacked. Or if he's the one, like, you know, initiating with 70% or more health. That would have been better overall. It would not have saved him, honestly. Well, actually, no. It would... The base weapon would actually have made so that he would be maybe A+. Very easy to work with at that point. But the fact that it's only attack and res is kind of just like, oh, look, I get points in what I'm already okay in. What's the point? Not really any. That's the problem. So, yeah, it isn't too great. So, overall, it's kind of very iffy. It misses the point of the character, and it just doesn't make anything that synergizes with one another, or gives stats where it would have actually really helped Jagen. Jagen's def is not amazing, but it's okay, so having more def would have been helpful. Having more speed would have blocked follow-ups and being able to work in certain ways, especially with one of the sets I'm about to show. So as far as builds are concerned, this is the first one. This is really the main one you'll be going for if you're ever going to use Jigen. Now, I use chill res in the seal slot. You can also use res ploy. The reason I use chill res is typically if you're dealing with someone that has enough res to block your ploy, which typically will be the case if you don't have Fortress Def res, then chills will be just more consistent overall. That's just what it is. But yeah, this set is very simple. You end up with, if you hit the sabotage attack, you end up with 51 def and 58 res. You're pretty bulky at that point. Or rather, you hit 51, 63, because of course you get another 5 res on top of it with the weapon, which can make him a fairly good dragon killer, and that's kind of the extent of him. It's not amazing. It's really not amazing. Sabotage Def is also there to synergize with this. It's kind of just mediocre overall, but it kind of does get the job done. Still, if you're going to go for a horse unit, please just go for Seth. He's going to be so much more consistently helpful. That's just how it is. Titania also. Titania especially because you can actually combo Rest Tactic, Attack Tactic, Speed Tactic into a Sabotage skill. If you run something like Fury or Fortress Def res, you will have enough res to work out with this, which opens a lot of things. It's essentially just Jigen, but it also able to buff your party in a way better fashion. Just my 2 cents on this. Overall, this weapon is not amazing. And another thing you can do with the weapon is just something like this, where you just completely disregard the Refine and just go for the fact that he gives 5 attack and 5 attack and res, which is why I said if it gave 5 across the board, this weapon would be a lot better. Because then what I would do is I would basically take this build, right? I would refine the weapon to defense, which would essentially mean that I would have 49 def and 50 res on enemy phase. Or if I'm initiating with over... wait, no, not if I'm initiating. Mostly so in enemy phase. But yeah, you'd end up with... what's that? 49, 50, and with attack ploy that would be 54, 55. Low attack def would push that to 57, 58. You are hella bulky at that point. And on top of that, the enemy phase here is not bad. You end up with like 50 speed, which allows you to be pretty good on the offense as well. But sadly, it does not provide 5 across the board, and it's instead you only get 5 attack and defense. So what ends up happening is that you end up with low attack def, as well as the weapon, pushing your attack overall to 61, which is not amazing, but it's an option. Do note Glacies might be a bit more consistent. Actually, in fact, it's just better. I screwed up on that one. It's better by 4 damage. You end up with 61 attack, 50 speed, which is actually pretty decent. And your def ends up at 45, your res at 50. And then you add on top of that the fact that you actually have those lows going on. So you're more so at 48, 53. So it's overall really solid, is basically what I'm trying to say. You become very bulky, but again, that's kind of just not amazing. And I can see a lot of characters doing something similar, if not better. Especially considering Launchion Lance is a thing, and that gives 4 attack and 4 def. Something very similar to this weapon. So yeah, overall, not much else to say here. It's okay. It definitely needs a lot more than what it got, but we're not going to get refines of refines, so that's basically what we're stuck with. Next up is Tobin, and I guess I should also talk about Gray and the reason why Gray is on the same tier. I'll wait until I get to Gray for him. So, Jubilant Blade, aside from being one of the dumbest names I've ever seen for a weapon, is basically just an armor killer, and when you have, you know, more max HP than the enemy, which can be a bit iffy, but since it's based on max HP, it's not so bad. You get 4 across the board. Now, this is not bad, and can make him a bit more consistent at being an armor killer, especially with units such as Winter Sophist. So, overall, this can be fairly useful if you want to use him in AA, which typically is what Tobin is used for anyway, because he comes with an armor smasher, basically. An armor slayer, in fact. But you can upgrade it to armor smasher. And that's kind of the main thing you would want to do with him, unless you're actually merging him up. Now, if you're merging him up, this is the kind of thing you can do with him. His stat line is very balanced, and as weird as that is to say, he gets attack and speed on the first merge, which is not bad. Overall, if you're using Speed Res Bond, okay, you essentially end up with 45 res, which is not bad already, and 47 def. 47-45 with very minimal effort is not bad, and unlike Jagan, it's multi-phase. So 47-45, really solid. And yeah, okay, I know what some people are going to say. You could just use it to be mixed phase on Jagan as well. Horse and Bonds are not exactly a good combo, is the problem. You would not be really able to use his stat line nearly as well. Or rather, the fact that he can move so much. And also, there's the difference of 16 BST between the two of them, so even then. Also, Jagan did not have this encounter, because if he had this encounter, he was going to die a lot easier as well. So, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, here you're looking at 47-45 bulk-wise. Speed is also good at 47, and your attack is also at a solid 62. Special Spiral also allows you to just chain Ignis, because it's going to go from 4 cooldown to 2 cooldown, meaning your attack get hit proc. Or if you have, you know, Brave Lucina, you just get hit and then proc immediately, which is a good way to one-shot just about whatever you're dealing with. If it's an armored unit, there's no way for it to tank whatsoever, so that gives you an idea. If it's something like Brave Ike, you're going to do a good chunk of his life, because essentially you're going to end up with 62, 74 plus the 37 damage, I think. Yeah, you end up at like 111 might against Brave Ike. Even if you hit his def, that's basically 80, and yes, it's reduced by 40%, but that's still 48 damage. That gives you an idea. And by the way, there's still a follow-up. So, yeah. Tobin can be very, very solid now. Still, the problem that he runs into is the fact that he's a Tempestral unit, and he's not a really good one at that. Especially with units such as Brunia existing, it's very, very, very difficult for me to just say, oh yeah, go for him. He's still probably going to move up a tier on the GHB Tempestral tier list, but I don't think much more than that. That's just kind of what it is. It's a good weapon overall, but 2,700 Grail, or actually no, 2,200 if you got both the first run and the rerun, is a bit expensive, especially, like I said, with unit like Jemki, Brunia, Aversa existing. It's really hard to just justify it. So, moving on to the second build now. This is one of the reasons why Grey is actually a lot worse overall than Tobin. Grey cannot actually afford to lose HP, or really to get under 50%, mostly. So, yeah, this is something you can do with him that work really well, and allows you to be both on the offensive or on the defensive. With Brazen Attack Speed and Attack Res active, which by the way is not that hard to proc, you end up with 42 speed already. 42 speed is not bad. It's at the point where you're getting a bit shaky and potentially getting doubled. But if you have something like Drive Speed, you're going to be fine-ish. at least fine enough to set up Brazens. And once Brazens are off, you are off. You're going to be at 78 attack. And, wait, 62? 71, 78. Yeah, 78 attack. As well as 52 speed. All of a sudden, you become pretty strong. Also, your def is at 47 and your res is also at 47 because of Brazen Attack Res and Jubilant Blade. So, 47-47 bulk-wise with 54 health on top of 78 attack and 52 speed. This is something Grey cannot do. Yes, you can use Brazens on Grey, but it's so unwieldy that you might as well not bother with it because your weapon is just going to snap before you get to the point where you can actually really use it. And another thing is the fact that Grey cannot be supported too well. Well, you'll see what I mean once we get there. So yeah, overall, pretty decent unit. Really just only held back by the fact that he is a Tempestral unit, and Tempestral unit do not get reruns because, well, there's no reason really. We just don't want to give rerun to Tempestral units, says IS, I guess. I don't know what to say. Now let's move on to Grey. Now Grey at face value looks like to have one of the best refine of the bunch. In fact, should have the best refine of the bunch because his weapon essentially gives 8 across the board and is effective to Cav, which don't matter because Cavs are dead content. Outside of Leaf, but Leaf was not a problem anyway. You just basically face tank him with DC and you kill him immediately after. Who cares? But, and by the way, Cavalry Killer would not have made a difference. So, you know, outside of the fact that if the guy is the one playing the character, which blocks your follow-up, oh boy, but that doesn't really matter because that only will affect you in maybe AR, and that's kind of it. It just doesn't matter. So, alright. Overall, here's the few issues you have with this weapon. You see that 5 across the board? That denies you from using Brave Lucina support. You need to be outnumbered. And having Brave Lucina around you means you cannot bait any enemies one at a time. You have to be baiting the entire time. And at the very end, you will also not get the buff. This makes it extremely shaky to work with. And therefore, you should probably not even bother with Brave Lucina. Because it's just overall very shaky. And the base effect also denies you from using Brazens, as I mentioned earlier with Tobin, which is also hella restrictive. This is why they are on the same tier. It's not to say Grey is garbage. I do think Grey is overall better, especially with the fact that he's on weekly banners, which have really good rates, which makes it a lot easier to merge. But while that is true, both effects are very restrictive. Denying Brazens is downright cruel, and also denying the fact of getting any support is also awful. This is the whole reason why Dracofalchion is overall a terrible pref that nobody should use. And why Hard's Blade, yes, that's right, Hard's Blade is overall a better weapon. Despite the fact that Hard's Blade is not a pref. At least compared to Dracofalchion. Here there's a bit of a difference because you can also have 3 across the board if you have over 50% health. But yes, this kind of locks Grey into being a bit more conservative with his stats. While the weapon, when it works, is really strong, it does just fail to synergize with anything really too good. The main thing that I can see it synergize with is Legendary Eliwood, because he does have a good chunk of attack to begin with. And so Legendary Eliwood with someone with speed opening and another person with res opening, or just Legendary Azura, you just go back and forth to get your buffs. This would help him a lot, and definitely gives him a certain amount of edge at that point, because you would be able to get 20 across the board effectively, which is insanely OP. But other than that, it's kind of shaky, and if you get hit by panic, that's kind of a problem. Thankfully, Grey does have a good chunk of health, though, so it's not that big of a problem. So let's talk about builds. Well, as I said, you can't really use anything such as, you know, Brave Lucina. This is with no follow-up, though I think I meant to put no see disrupt, though either way you can kind of use it in the same manner. I do feel like no see disrupt was what I wanted to have here. The idea is just to have mirror stance face tanking the enemy, which essentially means that you're going to be at, oh, I don't know, 48 def, 48 res, which is not bad. And to add to this, if you add Legendary Eliwood, this would push your bulk to 54-54, which is extremely solid at that point. Speed is a bit more shaky. Not really, it's at 50 speed, and with Legendary Eliwood that would be 56. And as for attack, you are at 65-73 attack, and if you have Legendary Eliwood help, you're at 79 attack. As I said, Legendary Eliwood is probably his best friend, as long as he has the highest attack of the team, which can be a bit shaky if you don't go for attack plus. But yeah, overall fairly solid. Ruptured Sky because you're kind of locked to having a 2 cooldown special, unless you run something similar to what I ran with Tobin, which was Special Spiral with Ignis, which I think is probably the second set or the third set. Ah yes, Bonus Doubler, which also works really well with Legendary Eliwood because this is attack plus on this set. Brazen Attack Res is here, but again, it's very shaky to use. Ideally, you're going to use Attack Res Bond instead. I think I kind of forgot about the first condition when I put the Brazen Attack Res there. I think I worked on this the day before my exam because I basically was not able to sleep despite being up for 30 hours. Oh, that was a mess. Anyway, so actually you can't even use Attack Res Bond because of his second ability, so not much you can do here, huh? I guess Mirror Strike would be the ideal choice, but you don't really have access to this yet. So, oh well. Probably Mirror Stance and hope to go for enemy phase. This here is not too great, I will be completely honest. You still hit a good chunk of stats, because at the end of the day, especially if you have Eliwood around you, Eliwood plus your weapon essentially push your attack to 84, your speed just jumps up to 54? No, 62, my bad, which is absolutely overkill, but no close call in this house will stop you, I suppose. Your def will go up to 60, and your res, ignoring the brazen, will go up to 52, 56 with Mirror Stance. Mirror Stance is probably going to be your best choice until we get Mirror Strike as a seal. But yeah. And last but not least is this one. This is a very basic one. It's basically the same as the first one, just a more survivalistic set. This is not with Brave Lucina because, as I said, you cannot use Brave Lucina with him effectively without losing 5 across the board all of the time, which is not really good. Yes, Brave Lucina provides you 5 across the board, 3 across the board, but it's a bit shaky, and just ignoring that weapon, at that point you're better off refining the weapon. Oh, actually no, I did refine the weapon. Wow, I should never do any video like 5 days after I've made the content for the videos. Well, not 5 days, I think it's 3 or 4. But yeah. This is refined to res because the second effect is very shaky and does not really allow you many things. So essentially, you end up with 40-40, 43-43, which is a bit less bulky, but you have Mystic Boost to keep your HP high. Mirror Stance is there to allow you to have more damage, and you can actually have Brave Lucina supporting you. So this is more so if you'd rather like be able to choose between Brave Lucina or without Brave Lucina with this set first and the first set that I've showcased. Those are really the two main sets that I would run with. And yeah, I don't think there's much else to say about Grey. Next up is Owen, and I hope I did not screw that one up this time. So, Owen. Our weapon is failing to explain a few things. It's not if an ally initiates combat against a foe within 2 space of unit, it's if unit or an ally initiates combat against a foe within 2 space of unit. Because Owen can actually use this effect herself. I don't know why it's not written, but she can. Essentially, if anyone that's within 2 space of her, if whoever it is that initiates against them will get the stats. So, or rather, will remove the enemy stats. So if she's the one initiating, she basically gets 5 attack and speed, because she removes 5 speed and res from the enemy. This is good, actually really good in AA, because what it can do is just allow you to score a kill that you would not normally get with units such as, oh, I don't know, Crom, Legendary Crom, by ignoring 5 of his res, which can be very helpful because Legendary Crom is extremely frustrating to deal with in AA. And before you tell me, oh, I have this unit that can kill him. Yeah, okay, what about counter number 2, 3, 4, and 5? Because if you think you only need 1 counter in AA, oh boy, you don't know the least of it. I had to deal with Crom last week. This was the first time I actually struggled so much in AA in my entire fucking time playing this game. It took me 4 hours to do 1 run. Now keep in mind, my score range is not small. I actually score as high as 762. But even then, this is really disgusting. Dealing with Azura and Crom at the same time, and sometimes sprinkled in with a bit of Leaf, is not really fun. And Crom does not have a whole lot of counters. Even Blade Tomes are not consistent on him because he tends to just cancel your attack and def buff because of low attack def. And sometimes you'll fail to even double, even with low win for some fucking reason, because the bastard can actually have a good speed stat. There's a lot of things that makes him really frustrating to deal with, and, well, I think I'll just move on from there. Essentially, this weapon allows you to just have an extra 5 damage against him, and it's consistent, which is pretty helpful. I just wish it was debuffing the enemy's attack and res, because if it did so, tanking a hit from Crom, for example, would be so much easier. Crom's biggest problem when he's at plus 10, or not Crom's biggest problem, but rather your problem with Crom when he's plus 10, is that you typically will struggle to one-shot. And because you don't one-shot, you get one-shot yourself. Because of the way his weapon works. And the way low attack def works, and the fact that you cannot buff your def to actually counter it whatsoever. It's kind of disgusting. Like, to give you an idea, the type of green tome that can actually tank her typically required to have 40 plus health and like 20 plus def. It's not fantastic. But yeah, this weapon is really good. It's a very good supportive weapon. The only drawback is that unlike Dargis or Gordon's weapon, you need to be initiating to get the stats off of the enemy. Which is why it removes more stats. That said, the fact that you have to initiate on the enemy really makes me think that this effect should be -6, not 5. Because this only removes 1 more point than what Gordon gets with a Brave Bow, mind you, which he does not need to be initiating. Works for your allies just as well as this, but also on enemy phase. Same thing with Tarja, same very similar thing. It's actually a Blade Tome that does -4 attack and speed to anything within 2 space of her, regardless of the phase, which is something that Thunderhead can't do. But hey, the extra 1 point in both stats certainly makes up for it, right? To be fair, Owen did not really need that refine to begin with, so, you know, I'm not as salty as I would be otherwise. Still, though, considering this is yet another Titania character that basically gets a shafted version of another character, it's getting old. Like, really old. Thunderhead is a worse Dargis X. Leaf's weapon is just a worse Anit's weapon. Just talking about the adaptive damage, by the way. The fact that, you know, Leaf that has a weapon that's literally meant to have adaptive damage because it hits either physical or magic, versus Anit that basically hits only magic with her weapon, but for some reason her weapon is actually, you know, adaptive damage, whereas Leaf is not adaptive damage. Go figure. And then you have this mess. Then you have Orson worse than Altina. Because, you know, Altina has no drawback to her weapon, while Orson has one. Then you have Shannon, that's actually worse than Larce for no reason. Yeah, like... can we just not? I would have been happier if it would just have done, like, -4 speed and res for any foe within 2 space, to be fair, but... oh well, I can't really design the weapon, otherwise we would have a lot more interesting weapons, I'll just say that. But still, it's overall a fairly solid weapon, and if anything, just count it as like Swift Sparrow 2.5 for Owen. Which is not bad. I mean, would you complain? I know I wouldn't. So yeah, as far as builds are concerned, this is the first set. This is using Fury 4 with, obviously, you know, Inspiration. For the fact that you can actually ploy at that point. 38 res is really good for ploying. And it's not like you really need attack plus. I mean, at that point, you're still hitting like 82 attack, 49 speed. And because of Thunderhead, you're hitting 87 attack, 54 speed. I think you're good, right? So having attack ploy is very helpful. This can also be replaced by rest ploy, but for some reason rest ploy is still locked to 5-star. It's still locked to Sonya, I think, and maybe a few other characters that are just as hard, if not worse, to get. I don't get this. I really don't get this, but oh well. I think Gunsha might also have rest ploy, but again, that's just a bad idea to fodder her off for that. But, you know. Overall, this is very cookie cutter, but the fact is, there's no cooldown +1, so you can just hit and then proc Glimmer. So it's overall fairly solid. So, yeah. Not much else to say about this one. It's just overall a fairly good weapon. As for the other set I've made, it's very simple. This is more or less the same thing, but it's meant to be a bit more bulky. This set hits 36, 37. Do know that attack ploy is very shaky here, and I have no idea why it's there. I think the idea I wanted to go for is rest smoke, but it did not copy properly. As ever. So 36, 37. With low attack res, you end up with 39 def and 40 res, which is fairly solid. You also end up with 50 speed because of the weapon. And again, because of the weapon, you go up from 54 attack to 78. Sturdy Blow pushes that up to 82 attack. So 82 attack, 50 speed. Or rather, hold on. 87 attack, 50 speed. Which is very solid. Or actually, no, it's 90 attack. Is that right? 54 plus 24 to 78 plus 5, 83 plus 4, 87. And plus 3, 90. Yeah, 90 attack, 50 speed. Did we get it? Yes. So essentially, this allows you to run Draconic Aura because you don't have Desperation. You'll typically just get hit, and then proc Draconic Aura. Draconic Aura with 90 attack, because it does count Blade Tome, in case you did not know, and today you learn, I guess. You end up with 27 damage done. Yeah, 27 damage for a 3 cooldown is kind of good. On top of 90 base attack, you know, as you do. So this is really solid. It basically just deals a one-shot in most cases, and if it doesn't one-shot, well, you'll have Draconic Aura ready pretty soon, essentially. So yeah, very cookie cutter, but welcome to horse units, I suppose. You don't really have a whole lot of choices when it comes down to horse unit, especially horse ranged units. Because of Reinhardt, because of that old bastard, there's basically nothing going on for ranged calves. They basically get nothing except their weapon. Anything else is completely not unique, which is a shame, but you know. But yeah, I think this concludes the refined tier list analysis. There's not much else to say here. This batch is pretty boring, I'm gonna be honest. Jenkins is boring, Owen is boring, then you get to Gray and Tobin, which both of them do the same thing, but in a different way, basically. One of them prefers Brazen, the other one doesn't. Like, Brazen and Bonds are basically Tobin's best friend, and Gray, on the other hand, is like, stance and blows, and that's kinda it. There's not much else you can work with me. Oh, and bonus doubler, of course. Very solid skill for him. But yeah, I don't think there's much else to add here. So, yeah. As for what's up next, I think what's next is probably going to be the GHB Tempestral Tears update. If I feel like it. I did say I was going to do it in the second half of the month, but the second half of the month also has Sacred Seals, so I don't know. We'll see once we get to it. I might start working on it right now, and we'll see when it comes out. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful, and hopefully the fact that, you know, I fucked up on a few sets because I was sleep deprived when I was working on them did not bother you all too much. As I said, I just could not sleep at the time, so I kind of wanted to work a bit on the video. So, yeah. And with that said, I guess I'm gonna see you all probably tomorrow, because I'm gonna be streaming tomorrow. Have a nice one, everyone. See ya.